loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive,
it is in pardoning that we are pardoned,
and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
WESN.
Hello there, and welcome to AM Prime. I'm Keaton Shaw. Thank you very much for joining us on WESN Content Capital, the home of Caribbean content. Hope all is well with you as we get straight into this morning's conversations. Well, with election season in full swing and all that is happening, all that is developing within established political parties, the latest is that former People's Partnership government ministers have indicated that they are willing to sue, such as Dr. Ford Catton and such as Wesn Barrett. In fact, Wesn Barrett has already let the political leader of the United National Congress know, at least according to one news article. And we're going to get into that discussion this morning as I welcome to the program Mr. Barrett. Good morning, Sin, and welcome to the program. Good to see you.
Thank you very much, Keaton. Good morning to you, and very good morning to your listeners and your viewers this morning.
So could we just clarify that you have indeed already informed the political leader of the UNC of your willingness to sue in an electoral capacity?
Absolutely. The political leader and I spoke in July of this year, and that discussion was based on what was happening in the country and the real need to remove the PNM at this point in time. And so therefore it was felt that a united effort was required with all hands on deck, as she's been saying for quite some time, to actually ensure that the UNC had a victory at the polls whenever the elections are called.
How has the political leader responded to your indication of your willingness to serve in a more elected capacity?
Well, it wasn't something that we went into great detail. What was important was organizing the party, having a discussion around what was required as the party went forward in terms of shoring up the resources and so on. So there wasn't an in-depth, at that time, discussion on me personally getting involved in representative politics. But I think the underlying tone of the discussion would have led to that eventually in terms of where that led. But of course, the initial discussions, priority was putting the UNC's house in order, ensuring that we had a strong response to the budget, and actually talking to people who are currently outside of the fold of the party, to try to bring them in a united effort to have the best possible team for the election whenever it's called.
You said putting the UNC's house in order, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. 3 years ago, approximately 3 years ago, you did say if the UNC doesn't put its house in order, then like-minded citizens such as yourself will be forced to look at political alternatives. So what is it, from your perspective, that the UNC needs to put its house in order? What is it that is required for the party to find itself in a place where one can suggest that its house is in order?
Well, we are in an election season, as you said at the top of the program. And some of the things that I felt that the UNC should have been doing over the last 9 years may be irrelevant at this point in time. So currently, if we are in an election year, all we're doing now is gearing the party up to win a general election. I felt over the years that we could have been more cohesive in terms of our party groups, in terms of our constituency executives, creating more of a family. But of course, the priority now is winning a general election. And so therefore, a lot of the things that I felt that was needed to have been done maybe it's a little bit late in the day to concentrate. Not that they are unimportant, but they are less important today as opposed to 5 or 6 years ago, maybe even 2 or 3 years ago.
If we are to just concentrate more so on winning the general election rather than those points that may be important or less important as compared to 3 years ago, do you think that it's going to be a cycle once more for the United National Congress, where fighting to win a general election, but not necessarily having its own home affairs in order?
Yeah, well, they're two separate issues, right? One is governance of the country, and the other is maintaining of a party or building a party. Okay, so currently the priority is to be in government. Currently the priority is to make sure that you have the best possible resources that gets you into government, and to be in a position to offer the population better goods and services that they currently have now. And of course, that relates to all of the issues in all of the sectors. Building the party is a separate issue, of course. And of course, as I said, now we're at a stage where our priority has to be getting into government, getting rid of the PNM, restoring a proper level of governance, and building the party, as important as it is, cannot be as important as getting into government at this point in time. So that becomes a secondary issue and a secondary priority. But that doesn't mean it takes away the necessity to do it at some point in time.
Do you think currently the United National Congress is in a position to challenge strongly in a general election? Do you think currently that it has a strong standing?
Look, Keaton, I would not be realistic if I said that at this moment the UNC is at its strongest point. I feel that we're building on that. I feel that by the time the election comes around, we will certainly be in a very strong position to challenge the PNM. But of course, work needs to be done. We can't sit on our laurels and hope that the poor performance of the PNM over the last 9 years will get us over the line as a matter of course. We still have a lot of work to do. We still have work to do in the marginal constituencies. Clearly, both parties have their strengths in their home constituencies, so to speak. And therefore, we're concentrating, obviously, on the marginal constituencies to ensure that we are in a strong position at come election time.
What would be your main focus? Following those conversations that you've had with the opposition leader in July, there's still a bit of there's no clarification as to what your role or position is within the party. Are you in a position to state that now for us this morning?
No, I'm not in a position at the moment to say exactly what my role is. But clearly, I think to the objective onlooker, I bring to the organization a wealth of experience, both in the private sector as well as in government. I ran several ministries whilst I was in government, and I have been a lifetime member of the UNC since its inception. So, and as you know, Keaton, I also come from a background where I've grown up in the political arena, my father being a former member of parliament for St. Augustine in the 1960s. So I've grown up in a home that has always been surrounded by politics and or influenced by politics and surrounded by politicians. So I bring a lot to bear in a multitude of different areas. And so therefore, it is for the political leader to determine where and when I'm able to assist. But I have offered my services, of course.
Do you think that maybe frowned upon a former government minister who served, yes, for 5 years in various capacities, in various ministerial positions? You are a former MP, you're also a former government senator. Do you think that may be frowned upon now, where there is not necessarily any new UNC blood being pumped into the party, where people have said, if you take a look at the People's National Movement, for example, you see more young people and more youth being incorporated into the party. However, if individuals like yourself and Dr. Ford can are now to return to the party, does it suggest the party is not progressing, but rather going back into an older formation to try and return to days that are in the past?
Well, I think any organization that's going to be successful has to be a mix of young blood and experience, whether it's a cricket team, whether it's a church, whether it's a corporate organization. You cannot make wholesale changes, just bring new people in and hope that they will succeed. That isn't how life works. So therefore, there has to be some sort of hand-holding process whereby the experienced... So I'll give you an example. If you were to elect, let's assume you had a wholesale change and you had 41 new candidates for the general election on the UNC's bench. And let's assume they won the election and you had 25 new cabinet ministers tomorrow morning, none of whom has cabinet experience, none of whom understands how the public service works, none of them understanding what the delivery of government goods and services, how the delivery of goods of government goods and services differs from delivering it in the private sector. How do you think that's likely to turn out? Not very good. So therefore, you have to have a mix of people who have been in government before, who understands the ringcraft of government, understands how the public sector works, understand to a large extent how the private sector works also. Because working in government and being a cabinet minister, particularly in some ministries, finance, trade industry, investment, agriculture, also, there is a private sector element where you have to deal with the private sector in those areas. So you need someone with a level of experience if you're going to be successful.
Do you think that you can be perceived as a threat, though, to the current cohort of UNC MPs? You've served as MP for St. Augustine previously. That seat is currently held by Khadija Amin. Do you think that you would be seen as a threat to her position within the party and her position as an MP? I know decisions have not been made as yet. Then I'm saying that based on what you've told me this morning.
I think, Keaton, the realities of the UNC is such that on the exigencies of the position the country is in, is such that everyone has to now put aside their egos and understand what is best both for the party and for the country. And hopefully the leadership of the party will understand the critical nature of making sure that the UNC is positioned properly to get into government. And so I don't look, human nature is such that people are always going to be concerned about their futures. That's natural, not just in politics. In your field as well, right? In every field. People feel that they have built a certain amount of goodwill, they've worked with a particular clientele, they've developed relationships. But life is all about moving on and moving up. And we've got to accept that. And we've got to look at what the bigger picture is as far as the country is concerned and as far as the party is concerned. So I think ultimately, yes, there may be some disappointments across the board, but we all have to live with that, and we all have to put that aside and be more concerned about the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Your response suggests that you may not have gotten the warm welcome that may have been associated with your return. Is that the case within the party? How has party members reacted to your comments?
No, actually, quite the opposite. I've had some very favorable interactions with current sitting members of parliament, because ultimately they want the best team going forward to win a general election. I mean, as you may have heard before, the saying that, you know, the worst day in government is far better than the best day in opposition, and they've been in opposition for 9 years. Nobody wants to, I can't imagine that anybody wants to be sitting in opposition for 9 years without any real ability to make the changes that are required in the country. and worse, to look at the next side, the opposite bench, and see the levels of poor performance, and basically have to grin and swallow it on a weekly or a daily basis.
So, if you may just help me to understand a bit further, of course, your past will also, it's an election season, your past will come up. And previously, you have indicated that people are fed up with the UNC. In a previous interview, I've raised this point as well, where you have indicated that people view the UNC and the PNM as being two sides of the same coin. Is wesn Bharat what the UNC needs at this point? Is wesn Bharat what is needed to stimulate the UNC in leading to a next general election? Is he going to bring the resources that are necessary to the party, or what the party needs at this point to win a next election?
Well, Keaton, that's a leading question, right? And it would be very presumptuous of me to determine whether or not I bring the resources or the capacity or the competence. I think my track record speaks for itself, both in the private sector and in government. I've worked all over the world. I've worked with several governments. I'm currently working with the government of Japan, in Cambodia. I've worked in Fiji. I've worked across the world. I've worked in, as you say, in several government ministries: Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Trade, Industry and Investment, Ministry of Communication. So I have a wide breadth of experience, capability, and competence. All I can do is offer myself and be accessible to assist the United National Congress. It is for the political leader and the screening committee and the national executive to make the determination as to whether or not I can be of assistance to them. It would be very presumptuous of me to tell you, yes, I can do this. Yes. All I can point you is to my past, what I've done over the last 20, 30, 40 years. I'm a chartered accountant by profession. I have a master's degree in law. I have an MBA. So I have professional academic qualifications to back up my experience in the real world. If those competencies and qualifications can add value to the United National Congress in terms of assisting the party to get into government, then I'm there to assist. Now,
respectfully, you do have quite a decorated CV. And fair enough, that's very much something that one can understand. But again, respectfully, I say, what track record do you speak of? There may be some individuals who are familiar with the name wesn Bharat, but not necessarily what wesn Bharat has done, even as a government minister. So what track record exactly are you speaking of? What are you referring to?
Well, prior to coming to government, I worked in the private sector extensively. Prior to coming back to Trinidad, I was head of global marketing with Gulf Oil, in charge of the marketing functions of 55 countries across the world. Prior to that, I was European General Manager of Thomas Cook, then the largest airline company in the world and the second largest provider of foreign exchange. And by the way, one of the achievements of Thomas Cook was being the first company in the world to launch a global platform, which was a website for the sale of foreign exchange. It's the first company in the world that did that. And just going back to Gulf, my responsibilities there essentially revolved around restoring the Gulf brand with a level of homogeneity across the world. Because when I took up office, the Gulf brand looked different in Brazil, it looked different in India, it looked different in China, it looked different in the Americas. And it was trying to bring the Gulf brand together. And eventually we came up with the slogan, your local global brand, so that each country could have the nuances of that specific country and that specific culture expressed in the brand, but the brand must have looked the same across the country, across the world. So those are the two last jobs I had before coming back to Trinidad. When I did come back to Trinidad, I took up the post of Chief Executive Officer of Nutrimix Flour Mills, which was a failing brand, Country Pride Flour. I relaunched Country Pride Flour. We went from almost 0% market share to 45% market share against national farmers who had been in, as you know, a monopoly for 50 years at the time. So my private sector experience, I mean, prior to that, I was managing director of Agostini's for 10 years. I launched a product called Chiquis Diapers across the Caribbean, South America, Peru, Chile, Paraguay. So I don't think there's any doubting my experience in the private sector as a leader. And in all of those positions, in all of those companies, I led in some way as general manager, managing director, and so on and so forth. So from a leadership position, and certainly from a position of being able to accomplish things in the private sector, I would say that most people looking at my CV and listening to my exploits in the private sector will say that I've been very successful. Similarly, in government, as you know, I started off as Minister of Agriculture. To this day, people still remember the work that we did in the Ministry of Agriculture. In the first year, we put down 300 retention ponds. We built 250 kilometers of access roads. It was the largest distribution of state lands since Dr. Williams gave out lands in 1966. We gave out 4,162 acres of lands. We were able to process thousands of leases. So the work in agriculture is there for all to see. We launched several buy local programs. We started to encourage more people to eat local foods. We made quite a significant dent in the imports of food into Trinidad and Tobago by encouraging local agriculture, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, I went on to Ministry of Trade and Industry. And at the ministry, one of the biggest bugbears that we've suffered throughout our history in Trinidad and Tobago was getting foreign direct investment into Trinidad. Because remember, Keaton, that we are competing with the rest of the world. We're not just competing with the Caribbean, we're competing with the rest of the world for foreign direct investment. And in a world where today money can easily be moved, even you can use your cell phone and move money around the world, people have a multitude of choices. So why choose Trinidad? One of the biggest issues that we had was what we call the ease of doing business, which has reared its ugly head again now. But one of the problems was ease of doing business. Starting a company in Trinidad and Tobago took 72 days. 72 days to start a company. So why would you, as an investor looking on from Europe, want the headache of coming to Trinidad and Tobago to start a business that would take you 72 days to start? Well, we embarked on that exercise, and at the end of it, we brought the number of days to start a business in Trinidad and Tobago down to 2 days. 2 days, when I was told initially it couldn't be done, down to 2 days. And today you could go online and you can start a business. You can get all of your documentation within 2, maximum 3 days. So those were some of the things that, I know many others. In fact, in 2015, Trinidad and Tobago was praised by the World Bank as being one of the top 10 reformers in ease of doing business worldwide in 2015. We've now reverted. We went from number 86 in the world down to 62, number 1 being the best, of course. We're now 105 or 108. So we've regressed significantly. But the work that we started, and it wasn't just me, many other members of that government, the PP government, did a significant amount of work. I was also, at the time, during the time I was Minister of Trade, Industry, Investment, Mrs. Bissessa, in her wisdom, also appointed me as Minister of Communications, so I held that portfolio as well as Minister in the Ministry of Finance. And then also, at the very same time, Chairman of the National Health Council, Chairman of the National Food Council, and a member of the National Security Council. So I held many different portfolios, many of them at the same time. So I was always juggling many different portfolios, and it takes a lot of effort, as you'll appreciate, to be able to do those and to be able to do them well. So in a nutshell, those are some of my accomplishments, and I feel, therefore, I still have a tremendous amount to add in terms of value to the country.
We do not know when the election date is going to be called. It's still very much in the mind of the Prime Minister, unless a decision has already been made that we are not necessarily aware of. But with that said, how much time is too little time for Vasan Bharat to know or seek some sort of clarification as to his role or his position in the party, particularly in an upcoming general election. For all we know, an election could be called in December. There is still enough time for that to happen. At what point will there be a more clarified understanding as per Vasan Bharat's position and to his role in the party?
Look, I think that's not for me to determine, Keaton. That's for the political leader and the national executive of the UNC to make a determination on. Clearly, the more time we have, the greater our ability to be able to plan properly. That's not to say that there's no planning taking place. I'm sure there is. But there's still plenty of time. I don't believe that, clearly, as you just said, nobody knows what's in the mind of the Prime Minister, and it is his decision to be made. I suspect that we have Diwali now, we have Christmas on the heels of Diwali. I don't believe that an election is going to be called this year. Of course, we have Carnival early next year as well. But a decision will have to be made, I think, early next year. And I think that this government is on its last legs. I think that they will want to stretch it out for as long as possible. There may be some projects that they want to do based on the budget that they've just read in Parliament to try to get the population to feel maybe slightly differently, slightly better by implementing a few projects, the distribution of more handouts and so on. So I think we have some time. I don't think that the government is in a good position today to call an election. I think if they were to, they'd find themselves in a very precarious position. So I feel that we have enough time. And as I said, all I can do is to make myself available to the party. And let's make sure that we give Trinidad and Tobago a decent opportunity at making a change that's necessary to improve the quality of their lives.
Well, Mr. Bharat, I want to thank you very much for joining us on the program this morning. Thank you very much for your time indeed. And, well, I guess only time will tell. We shall see what happens. But for now, keep well and take care, sir.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Keaton.
All the best.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, let us take a break here on the program. We will return shortly with a conversation that we will be having later on. We're starting that with a conversation I had earlier this year with Dr. Asha Carroll in respect to reparations. That interview we will be sharing with you in a bit, followed by a conversation with a gentleman out of the island of Tobago to have an understanding as per exactly how reparations may work, how it can work. But stay with us, we'll be right back after this.
When it comes to Pira and Laddu, I just use Chatak's Laddu and Pira Mithai Mix. It's a combination of traditional ingredients in one pack. I don't spend all that time preparing different ingredients like Ma. 3/4 of the work is done. So now I can make fresh, delicious Pira and Laddu in about 15 minutes with the convenience of Chatak's Laddu and Pira Mithai Mix. Now Ma's Kitchen is a Chatak kitchen. Now available Gulab Jamun Instant Mithai Mix.
Very first day they opened, my mother and my father and I came in here. I love to see it. It's neat, really, really neat.
You know, we have many sections in Price Club. The food court section is a variety here.
Any one of them you ask, they are very helpful. I love it.
We get low price, specials, and everything every day.
The prices are very, very good. It's cheaper than everywhere I've been.
Diwali is in the air again, and Royal Castle reminds you to try its yummy veggie burger. The Royal Castle veggie burger is great on its own or in a combo with a side and a 16-ounce drink. And it's healthy too. A nutritious patty made with oats, lentils, chana, potatoes, and carrot. Inside a soft bun with tomatoes and lettuce. So for this season, try the Castle's tasty and healthy veggie burger. Shubh Diwali from Royal Castle.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Perfection doesn't happen by chance. Like an artist, the cook selects the main ingredient, one that is worthy of a proud cultural tradition. Trusted to enhance your creations with its richness and versatility. To create a cooking masterpiece, the secret is simple. The brand we know, the brand we trust, the brand our ancestors have been using for generations.
There is only one pure cow brand ghee. Look for the marks of authenticity.
When it comes to Pira and Laddu, I just use Chattox, Laddu and Pira Mithai Mix. It's a combination of traditional ingredients in one pack. I don't spend all that time preparing different ingredients like Ma. 3/4 of the work is done. So now I can make fresh, delicious Pira and Laddu in about 15 minutes with the convenience of Chattox, Laddu and Pira Mithai Mix. Now Ma's kitchen is a Chatta kitchen.
Lighting up for Diwali just got simple with the easy-to-use Anand brand wax diyas. They're scientifically engineered to last longer, burn brighter, and keep on lighting. Anand brand wax diyas do not require any prepping or filling and has less spillage and cleanup. These diyas are recommended for outdoor use and can withstand light wind and rain. Plus, they're eco-friendly. Redeem your use cases for cash back. So put some green innovation into your Diwali celebrations with Anand brand wax diyas.
My mom has been shopping here for the last 15 years. So coming here with her, now I have my own family.
The variety of items, cleanliness of the place, the spaciousness.
My favorite section is household.
My husband loves the hardware section and the auto section. My favorite would be stationery.
Price Club is the low price leading supermarket in TNT.
They are the best. I would recommend Price Club to anybody.
I just love Diwali. I put everything in place so my home is perfect for this season. And thanks to the little store, I get everything in one place. I picked up some Anand and Shankar brand wax diyas, hand-painted clay diyas, my coconut oil, cotton wicks, all my puja items, plus step-by-step guide to Diwali puja and Havan. My home will look and feel like Diwali with pretty hanging decorations, floating lights, rangolis and flowers, all from the little store. I'm all set to welcome Lakshmi Ma and and all my guests. I've ordered some delicious fresh mithai in decorated boxes and bags and got some frozen vegetarian products, spices, all my groceries and hygienic paper sohari leaves for a delectable Diwali feast. Go to the Litter Store in Curep. They've got additional parking and they're open on Sundays. Check them on Facebook or call 663-4415.
Come travel with us as we explore Diwali across the globe. Diwali is celebrated in many countries worldwide, but do you know the traditions and practices of each nation? From Guyana to Australia, WESN presents Diwali Passport.
October 9th to October 30th, with replays on October 31st.
It's Diwali Passport, a WESN exclusive.
Welcome back to AM Prime, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with us this morning. As mentioned, we have a packed program, so we'll continue with the conversations as we now focus on the first public consultation on the placement of statues, monuments, and other historical signage across Trinidad and Tobago. Such consultation took place on Wednesday, and it was held at Government Plaza. That being said, a lot happened there, so let's get into that story this morning. I'm pleased to welcome to the program the Executive Chair of the Emancipation Support Committee, Ms. Zakia Ozuma Wadada. Good morning and welcome to AM Prime.
Yes, good morning, and welcome to your viewers, and thank you so much for having me this morning.
Well, thank you very much for joining me on the program. As I mentioned, a lot happened.
Yes.
There are stories circulating suggesting what happened, but please, can you share your experiences exactly what took place on Wednesday at the first public consultation?
Yes. Well, of course, the Emancipation Support Committee was invited to participate in the consultation. We've had an audience with the committee previously. We were able to speak with them, as an organization, along with the Caribbean Freedom Project. So we did have a consultation with them previously. We've also submitted a document, with really quite a bit of information. But of course, on the invitation, I also agreed that I would participate. We would attend because it's important, even in the public spaces, who represent your organization. And I also, at that time, spoke on behalf of the National Committee on Reparations, of which I am the deputy chair. So our chairperson, Dr. Claudius Fergus, was not on island, and he asked that I represent the committee. So I was making the point to the public that Trinidad and Tobago is celebrating its 62nd year of independence on Saturday, and that we are close to 50 years of republic, because in September we will be celebrating 48 years as a republic, and it is really time that we give due consideration, and it's happy that this conversation is in the air, because it is really, really past the time for us to look at how our physical space represent us, and we cannot perpetuate space that is reflective of the ideals of those who the Europeans who once controlled the space, because they would have put into the space the monuments that meant that they considered to be important, that represented the persons or the things that were important to them. And they named the streets and so on after persons that were important to them. And we can't, especially as a republic, because even independent status, you still have the previous colonial government as your head of state. But as a republic, we are a fully independent nation that can make its own decisions. And therefore, I think that at 50 years, of almost 50 years, it is time that we really, really begin to consider how our physical space represent our ideals, represent our values, and we put into that space the names or monuments of persons whom we hold in high esteem and who we would want our children to emulate. So that's mainly the point I was making. And I also stress that because we are in the final year of the decade for people of African descent, the ongoing cry for Oxford Street to be renamed Kwame Ture Street, we should really actually do that as part of the commemoration of that decade, and so that at least one of our heroes of African descent is recognized in Trinidad and Tobago, and Oxford Street is the street on which where he grew up, that's where he lived, that's where he spent his first formative years, So there was a gentleman in the audience who was not too happy with what I was suggesting, and which is okay, because that's why we have public consultations to get different views. But I think his approach and his attitude was quite disrespectful, and I think that's what really caused that bit of contention in the space. And then particularly he tapped it off when when I mentioned that we were in the decade for people of African descent. I don't know if that's what stimulated his making of the comment that then why don't I go back to Africa? Of course, from where he says it, of course, we know it is a kind of disdainful, kind of disrespectful remark. But I mean, asking us to go back to Africa is not insulting in the sense that we don't have any problems returning to Africa. We don't have any problems returning to our homeland, because it is that we have not rejected that as part of our own history. But of course, he did not say it in any positive way. But as I said, people are going to respond to things from where they are. And yes, that can be with respect to your information. But of course, politeness and being respectful is something that, we should always perhaps keep in mind. No matter how we feel about things, we have to find an appropriate way in which to express ourselves. So he kept talking during my presentation until, of course, persons in the audience started to object and insist that he was put out of the room, that those kinds of responses came from some of fellow activists in the room. But then eventually, I think Mr. Lawrence, he did a really good job in trying to, placate the situation and bring things back to put order back into the space. And of course, eventually, the gentleman himself was also allowed to speak, But again, it was reflective based on his contribution. It was reflective of, and he said as his responses were based on what he said he was taught in school. So of course he taught that the first people were savages. And he said it, and he also thought that, people like Stokely Carmichael, who we did not refuse to call Kwame Ture, was a troublemaker, who the previous prime minister had asked to not, has banned from the country. And therefore, why would we want to make someone like that a hero or someone who we should, venerate, but I think it showed that lack of appreciation and understanding of all of the histories of all the peoples who live here. None of us came here because we wanted to come and party and have a good time. The enslaved persons were terribly traumatized by the arrival of Europeans in this space. They brought their diseases, and they got very ill. They had to work really hard against their will. They were forced to become Christians. All of these things took place for the first peoples, and then when the number of the first peoples were decimated to such a point that they now brought in Africans as enslaved persons. We didn't come to have a good time. We came and suffered a lot of trauma and disrespect and pain. And then we went on to indentured laborers. They didn't come again to have a good time. They came to work for very little money and to do very hard work to build the empires of European nations.
If I may, I know previously at earlier this year, I think it was for Emancipation Day celebrations, and the Prime Minister in his message, he says he wants Trinbagonians to feel proud of their culture. We should be proud of our culture. The thing is, though, do you think that removing these statues would actually render us being more proud of our culture, who we are as a people? Do you think that removing these statues would actually resolve the issues? Because previously you've expressed that though we have been emancipated, full emancipation has not been realized as yet. Do you think that removing these statues and historical signage would actually lead to a difference, a change, something more positive?
Yes, it will, because one thing is everything has its own energy, and also when we put into our spaces, so for example, if we have our children, for example, if they're growing, and we have statues of people like Pat Bishop, we have statues of C.L.R. James in our space, Henry Sylvester Williams, representatives of the heroes of the First Peoples, of the Indian community, of our Chinese community, all the people who live here, they may have persons who they would like to hold in high esteem. If we are able to surround ourselves with that kind of energy of people who we revere, who made significant contribution to who we are, because that's the reasons why Europeans had those people up. They thought that Columbus was a great representative of themselves because he opened the pathway for their exploitation of a whole lot of people and enrichment of themselves. So they held him in high esteem. They held people like Picton and Woodford and all of those people in high esteem because they contributed to their ideal, to their goals. We now have to know who are the people that are contributing to the same culture for which we should feel proud. Who are the people that have contributed to who we are today? So that when we tell our children these stories, are they going to find something that they should emulate? Oh, I would love to be like Pat Bishop. She was such a great artist, a musician. She was such an important person in our society. I would love to be like a C.L.R. James, who worked so hard for the liberation of African people and contributed so well to the independence of countries on the African continent. So we are giving, once we put it, we are giving them stories about their own capacity and the possibilities that there are. When we name streets after, Lord Kitchener, we name a street as has been done in the past after Black Stalin. When we name these spaces after the persons who we hold in high esteem, we are also presenting to the society and to the children stories about us. You see? And therefore, it is really important, and it will make a change over time. It will indeed, because our children, our young people, the African public cannot connect So we are walking through the city of Port of Spain, and people have no idea.
I hear the point. I hear the point that you're making.
Yes.
But do we also need to recognize that this was a part of our history, and that we also, though we are not, we don't like it, and we are struggling to accept it at times. Do you think that we need to be very careful that we don't wash our history, and that we understand that, listen, through all these turbulent times, through all the toils and plight of the people and what they went through, still a nation was birthed? Do we have to be very careful that we are not trying to remove that part of our history as TNT?
Not at all, because you see, the history is not going to change. The history is still in the books, and we can still teach them to our children. What we put in our physical space is not just about us remembering our history, it is about the energy that we are putting in the space as well. You see? So that we have to now decide. Yes, the fact the people are going to always tell the story of Columbus, but by focusing on their history and the history that was presented to us by the Europeans, we don't focus on our own history. So our children don't know of some of the people's names that I have called. Our children don't know of the, enough perhaps of the Butler riots and why it was significant and important to Trinidad and Tobago. Our children don't learn in school about the Black Power Revolution and why it was important to Trinidad and Tobago. So there are things that have occurred as part of our history, of our living history, that we don't emulate, that we don't hold in high esteem, and we don't teach our children. And therefore, if we continue to perpetuate a space and focus on a history that was Eurocentric, inaccurate in a lot of ways, you follow, then we are doing a serious disservice to ourselves as a growing nation. That we have to, and that's what I was saying, even the traumas of our experience of the different groups, we don't remember that. We don't remember the heroes that helped to pull us out of that particular space. We remember very much those who put us into that space, but what about those who fought for us to come out of that experience? We're not remembering those people. We're not highlighting those people. So why would we have in our physical space all our oppressors and not our heroes, the ones who helped us to overcome? And therefore, moving physical things or renaming things does not necessarily equate to lost history. That history is still there, and we can still choose to teach it, but it does not have to be in our face.
So
that is what I'm saying.
So okay, I understand that. But though we may be in the process of this transition of cultural identity, because the argument that you're making is that we don't necessarily have a sense of identity of who we are as a people. This is why this process is very important. Renaming it or removing these statues is one aspect of it, but surely this has to coincide with our school curriculum as well. And this has
most definitely. You understand? And that has been a call, and that's why we ourselves, we do our own African history quiz for secondary schools, so that we have an opportunity as an organization to give the children that education about at least the African heritage of Trinidad and Tobago that they don't get in school. You see? And the thing is that is extremely important, because it must come with the education. You see, the naming of the streets and so on, you have to know who these people are. Why are we calling the street after this person? Why are we erecting this monument? So therefore, therefore perhaps, if those are the things that are in our spaces, maybe that might even help to strengthen the need to change the curriculum. Because then our children are going to maybe start to ask questions. You see, so that the education system must include the education of the history of Trinidad and Tobago, the history of the different peoples who came here. We may want to do it at different points and different levels in our in the system, in the trajectory of the children, primary, secondary, university. But we must understand the history of the different peoples who came here. Why are we only understanding the history of Europeans? You see? So, but we don't understand the history of what happened to, who were Indians before they came to Trinidad and Tobago, who were Africans before they came here, who were Chinese before they came here. And it is important. I don't accept this feeling that there's no Mother Africa, there's no Mother India. Yes, there are. And they are important because it shapes who we are. And the fact that and perhaps particularly in the case of the Africans, that our identity has been removed, access to our language or to our spirituality or to even our own worldview would have been taken away from us, and we would have been sort of, what you would call it, brainwashed into having a European perspective on life. Does not mean that we should not find out who we are. And if we understand the history, of all the groups that are living in society, it's going to build a better respect and understanding of each other.
Now, 1 year ago, you called on the government to invest in TNT's culture, to inspire a sense of identity. That message has not changed. You've been very passionate at the consultation. You've been passionate here this morning. One of the comments, which was rather interesting, being 1 year ago, you said a sense of identity among Afro-Trinidadians could ultimately reduce crime. Right? 1 year ago, you made that comment, and you said that black people suffered a loss of self because of slavery, adding the effects remained etched in the psyche of locals. Again, something of which you mentioned this morning. And you said the oppression has lent itself to a cycle of violence, but more firearm user licenses was not the answer. That's a different point in time. We don't have to get into that. But I'm curious to know exactly how inspiring a sense of identity and culture would actually ultimately reduce crime. I'm going to that. That's a comment you made 1 year ago, and I'd like you to explain it a bit further.
Okay. So, the country where we live is very much impacted because the world has become such a, what you would call it, a small space, because there's so much access to information and what's happening outside of our own shores. So if we are observant, we would note that the world has sort of embraced this culture of violence, power, and materialism. And it is what we here in Trinidad and Tobago, so many of our young people have also bought into that culture, because it is also manifested at the highest levels of society. This focus on materialism and power, and their violence might be may not be as physical as the violence that is demonstrated at the level of the grassroots. But there's also violence, and of course, in some cases, it explodes into major wars as we fight over power, you see, and we use violence to do that. If, as a human being, there is nothing else, there's no alternative understanding of this living experience, if there's no alternative understanding of who I am in this space, if there's no alternative culture that allows us to see ourselves as different from a tool or someone who is just being what we call it, absorbed by this culture of violence and materialism, then we don't have an option to fight. We don't have an option not to fight within that, but to fight against it. You see? So that we have to put into the space for our children a better understanding of themselves and link them to the cultural things that bring that sense of self to them and their own value, and that their value is not determined by material acquisition, and therefore I have to fight for that. Or my value as a human being is not determined by if I am more powerful than this other person, and therefore I have to fight for that. But my value is in, my being, my link, my connections with the unseen energies of life, how I perceive success, how I perceive achievement, how I perceive growth and development as a human being, how I understand my purpose while I am here. You see, and those things come out of our cultural traditions. And those of us here in the country who are still able to hold on to those traditions understand what I am talking about, because it gives you a sense of self. But because as a group in the society, we have been denied that, we were denied that, we now have to try to find it. You see, and if it is we don't find it, then we are like, those, like a tree, what do we say, a tree without roots, and therefore shaft blowing in the wind, as if I want to use a biblical expression, which can be taken up by any wind or force that is passing. And therefore, if we don't ground our children in some sense of culture, who we are, what is valuable, what makes sense, what is important, what makes me an important human being, what makes me valuable, then they buy into this culture that their value is linked to what they have. And if they don't have it, then they would fight for it, because that's how they believe people put value to them in the society. You see? So
very, very, very interesting perspective indeed. Yes. My final question to you is it's to the topic. It's just a bit away from the general theme of the conversation this morning. One of the suggestions that have been made at this consultation, this first public consultation, that has been expressed previously many a times, is that we should also look to be renaming our capital city Port of Spain. Where do you stand on that?
I mean, I understand the rationale. Why is the city of Trinidad, the capital city of Trinidad, called the Port of Spain? We go back again to the history, because when it was ruled by Spain, it was appropriate for Spain to call the city Puerto de España, and we have decided, and it has been changed. Now some people say, okay, for prosperity, lots of things would take, but it makes sense. Whether we decide that that's something we want to do, but someone asking to do that makes sense. Why is the capital of Trinidad and Tobago called the Port of Spain? You know what I'm saying? So we have to decide, okay, all right, we can live with that, or do we want to give our capital city a name that is reflective of our own vision for our city? You see, these things are up for discussion. These things are not absurd in their in the thought process, because what the person is saying makes sense. You follow? But we have to decide, do we want to hold on to it, because we said, okay, that's how we got the name, we want to hold on to it, but we do have the right, if we so do not no longer want to be called the Port of Spain, because we are no longer the Port of Spain, we are the Port of Trinidad and Tobago, but or the part of Port of Trinidad. We can decide to call it what we want to call it. And you see, that's what I think people need to understand. As a Republican state, we can call our cities, we can name our spaces, we can erect the monuments that we choose. We have that right. The process of doing that, what we change and what we don't change, it has to be part of maybe a national discussion. But the fact is that people must understand that we have the right to do it, and there's good rationale for doing it.
Indeed. Well, Ms. Kia Uzuma Wadada, thank you very much for joining me on the program this morning. Thank you for your time and for expressing your thoughts and opinions with us on these public consultations. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you to your viewers.
All the very best. Take care. Ladies and gentlemen, I haven't had the opportunity to do this previously, but I will tell you a story about my interaction, my first in-person interaction with Ms. Kia Zuma Wadada. I actually, on Tracker Road, I shut down. I was a bit further away from the office, and interestingly enough, I shut down. My car wasn't starting. I think it was a battery problem at that point. Ultimately, it was. But the rain was coming, and Miss Uzuma Wadada stayed. She tried to assist. She pulled out her starter pack from her vehicle. She came to my vehicle. This lady, it's going about to rain, and when I say rain, I'm not talking about it was dark. It got dark, and she stayed and she assisted me, and I'll never ever forget that. And I think that really, ladies and gentlemen, is something that those are the little lessons, and those are the little instances that all of TNT must practice. You see, that sort of love and appreciation for one another, I certainly will never ever forget that. So thank you very much to her for that. I'm glad I could finally say it, boy. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a break here on AM Prime. We will return shortly to wrap things up for this morning. Stay with us.
When it comes to Pira and Laddu, I just use Chattox, Laddu and Pira Mithai Mix. It's a combination of traditional ingredients in one pack. I don't spend all that time preparing different ingredients like Ma. 3/4 of the work is done. So now I can make fresh, delicious Pira and Laddu in about 15 minutes with the convenience of Chattox, Laddu and Pira Mithai Mix. Now Ma's kitchen is a Chatta kitchen.
I have been shopping at Price Club from the beginning. I love most of all the friendliness of the staff.
I shop here because my children love meat and I love meat.
My favorite section is the vegetarian section. They have such a wide variety, which I love.
I have been out shopping, to check out the prices, but here at the Lewis, it's the best.
I have tried other places and I came right back to Price Club because they are the low price leader.
I just love Diwali. I put everything in place so my home is perfect for this season. And thanks to the little store, I get everything in one place. I picked up some Anand and Shankar brand wax diyas, hand-painted clay diyas, my coconut oil, cotton wicks, all my puja items, plus step-by-step guide to Diwali puja and Havan. My home will look and feel like Diwali with pretty hanging decorations, floating lights, rangolis and flowers, all from the little store. I'm all set to welcome Lakshmi Ma and all my guests. I've ordered some delicious fresh mithai in decorated boxes and bags and got some frozen vegetarian products, spices, all my groceries and hygienic paper sohari leaves for a delectable Diwali feast. Go to the little store in Curep. They've got additional parking and they're open on Sundays. Check them on Facebook or call 663-4415.
Diwali is in the air again, and Royal Castle reminds you to try its yummy veggie burger. The Royal Castle veggie burger is great on its own or in a combo with a side and a 16-ounce drink. And it's healthy too. A nutritious patty made with oats, lentils, chana, potatoes, and carrot. Inside a soft bun with tomatoes and lettuce. So for this season, try the Castle's tasty and healthy veggie burger. Shubh Diwali from Royal Castle.
SM Group International Limited, your solutions partner for the latest innovations, brands and competent staff to meet your needs. We provide products and services in the following divisions: executive services, event rental and services, power and heavy equipment, construction and property management, food and beverage, aggregate and sales and distribution. Check out more on our products and services at www.smgrouptt.com. Contact us at 221-7445 or email at info@smgrouptt.com. We are SM Group International, your solutions partner.
Lighting up for Diwali just got simple with the easy-to-use Anand brand wax diyas. They're scientifically engineered to last longer, burn brighter, and keep on lighting. Anand brand wax diyas do not require any prepping or filling and has less spillage and cleanup. These diyas are recommended for outdoor use and can withstand light wind and rain. Plus, they're eco-friendly. Redeem your use cases for cash back. So put some green innovation into your Diwali celebrations with Anand brand wax diyas.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being with us this morning as we continue with this edition of the program. Last week, Friday, my colleague Sean and I were taken aback. We were quite surprised as per the impassioned commentary from our viewers on Talking Point in relation to reparations the conversation of reparations for Caribbean Commonwealth nations. Now, that being said, we were taken by surprise in the sense that we had spoken of topics that had nothing to do with reparations. But people wanted to have that conversation. And we're glad for that. We appreciate that. So thank you very much, because that actually led to the birth of this morning's conversation on AM Prime with my next guest, Mr. Rodney Piggott. He's a social and cultural activist who has many other roles. But this morning we welcome him in that capacity to speak about Caribbean and Commonwealth nations, the conversations of reparations. Good morning, sir, and welcome to AM Prime.
And good morning to you, Kitan. Thank you for having me on your show. Good morning to Trinidad and Tobago and to the world by extension, because I know that wesn is an international and worldwide show and has a listening audience across the globe. So good morning to all of you, and especially good morning to my friend, comrade, Ms. Wadada. Good morning to you, and let me also take this time, Kitan, if you'll allow me, to share my condolences with Ms. Wadada for the loss of her son in the violent crime that took place. So let me share my condolences with her on that behalf.
Indeed. Thank you very much for that, and of course, condolences from the entire family at WESN. That's a replay of an interview we had with Ms. Wadada just a couple months ago. But Mr. Piggott, the conversation of reparations, before the Commonwealth Health of Government meeting in Samoa even started, there were hints that that was going to dominate discussions. And the Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer, he took a position immediately before the meeting started. He said, we can offer an apology, but the conversation of reparations is, it's nothing that we can actually facilitate at this point. Commonwealth nations were urged to not, bring that up at the Commonwealth Health Government meeting. They decided, no, we're going ahead with it anyway. We forged ahead. Why is this conversation more than ever gaining so much attention, and why is it important, especially now in the time period that we find ourselves in?
Plainly put, Kitan, it's a festering wound, right? It has never healed. What the European did to the African was not a paper cut, right? So time did not heal it. If you have a paper cut on your finger, you don't have to really do much to that. You don't probably have to clean it and bandage it or any of those things. Before the day is over with, you look at it, oh my God, the thing is practically healed already. Time will heal that paper cut. But if a shark bites into your hip and take a chunk out of you, Kitan, time will not heal that wound. If you leave that wound unattended, pretend that it's not there, go about your business, Kitan, over time, that wound will fester. You understand? And it will reach a critical point where your very life is now hangs in the balance because of that wound you received that you never treated with. That is what the so-called slave trade was to the African. It was a wound, a festering wound, a shark bite, and it never got healed. It wasn't cleaned out, no dressing was put to it, and so it has been festering. Those in power, like the Prime Minister in England, even Barack Obama, the President of the United States, when he first went into office, the first signal he sent to the African people that he claimed to be part of was that don't even come to me with that reparations talk. So all the governments that are culpable for this crime against humanity, or as the UN delegation found back in, I think, 2001, this was the greatest crime against humanity. Okay? What they don't want to do is to own that crime. Because if they own that crime, then a lot of other sub-crimes may now come into focus, and the balance of power in the world will now shift. They will have to share that podium now, because they will have to admit to the world that what they did was a criminal act, right? Starting with the papal bull by the Pope back then in 1452, that sanctioned for the King of Portugal to go into the West African coast and submit those Saracens, those heathens, those people of Africa who were not into the Christ ideology, right? He actually used that word. These people are savages. They're not, they're not about Christ. People that accept our religion, Christ, Christian, they're absolved of their savagery. But these people, they still have their practice in place. And so go there and enslave them, put them into bondage. And this is the word that you must understand, Kitan, for perpetuity. And if you look that word perpetuity up, that means forever. These people never intended for the African to be relieved of that shark bite. They never intended to dress that wound. They always intended for the African to be forever seen as subservient to the European interests and the American interests. Okay? And so now all of that is coming to a head, because as Africans, we never gave up the fight. We fought when they kidnapped us. We fought when they had us on the what we call the coffle lines leading from the interior of Africa to the coast where they had their slave castles. We fought along the way. We fought when they had us in those castles. We fought when they were putting us on the ships, right? We fought and jumped overboard. Many people fell, jumped over the ships into the waters to meet the sharks, rather than come into this life of slavery. We fought when they got us on the plantations, and we kept fighting. And so we're fighting today. The shackles are no longer on our feet and our hands, but because of this lack of due process, reparative justice is a due process that must take place. Because that has not taken place, yes, and enslavement is on the minds of the African, and this is what we're struggling to free ourselves from. Yes, go ahead, please.
You made the ethical argument, and you have said, or suggested rather, that enslaved Africans, when they were free, they were not necessarily compensated for being enslaved, and I understand that. But in respect to an empirical claim, what would you argue as being the generational effects of slavery, and how in the present day it has led to disadvantages?
And that's a very, very interesting question. I call you Kitan. I don't know what that name means. What does that name mean, Kitan? Do you know what your name means?
Yes, I believe it's poet, if I'm not mistaken.
It's what?
Poet. I think it means poet.
Poet? How did you get that name?
My grandfather. He lived in Kenya, and he gave me that.
Okay, he gave you that name. Okay, and what's your last name?
Shah.
Shah. Okay, does that name have a meaning?
King of Kings.
Okay, is that your family name, or did you give yourself that name?
No, that is my family name.
Very good. You see, so you have a family name that makes sense to you. It has a meaning to you. You understand? And when people hear that name, they sort of see a heritage that belongs to your family line that was not imposed on you by others, right? My name is Rodney Pigott. Now ask me what Pigott means. I have no idea. I have no idea. You understand? And so many of us are in that position where names were imposed upon us that we have no idea what it means. Now, a person's name is very, very important, right? You come from a culture that you know the naming process is a very important process, right? The elders of your clan, your family, your village, actually choose the names for the children coming in. They look into the children's eyes and so forth, and they see their future, and they give them names accordingly. We were stripped of that. I took you there because I want to give you just a very brief example of what was stripped from us. Our very cultural way of life was stripped away from us, right? No other people that would ever pass through domination by another people encountered that. We are the only people that when they got a hold of us, they cut off our hair, right? They shaved us bald, right? They forced us to eat food that the dogs won't even touch, right? They stripped us of our spiritual. How important is that, Kitan? They stripped us of our spiritual outlook, how we observe the Most High, all of our rituals. We were stripped of that. We were stripped of how we raise our families, our family interaction. The conversation you were just having with Ms. Wadada concerning crime and so forth, right? We were stripped of all of that, how we socialize our children into the world. You understand? Our educational process, why we educated our children. We were stripped of everything that says this is who we are. You understand? And we were made into a thing. We were made into a property that was less than the animal. Animals received better treatment than we did on these plantations under the domination of the European. Right? So this was not slavery. You see, a lot of people think this is slavery we're talking about. This wasn't slavery. This was chattel enslavement. We were reduced to less than animals.
The property, yeah.
Less than property even, because property, you'll take care of your property. You take care of your car. Your car is your property. You don't just do anything with your car. You treat it right because you want the car to treat you right. So when it's time to change the oil and so forth, you attend to those things. We were not even afforded that. You understand? You see, so this treatment itself is what was imprinted on our very cells. That trauma is what was imprinted on our very cells, Kitan. You see, so we're not talking about compensation here. You can't compensate me for that. You see, the term that we use today, Kitan, is called reparative justice, reparative justice. We've kind of moved away from the term reparations because reparations bring to mind money. When you hear reparations, people think automatically of money, compensation. But what we're really looking for is justice. You understand? So reparative justice, this is why the CARICOM's 10-point plan, and I can read that to you, and you'll see nowhere in there do they talk about giving us money. Nowhere in there do they talk about giving us money. The very first thing in the CARICOM 10-point plan is a full formal apology. Full formal apology. What does that do? That says now that you, the governments, take responsibility for what your former administrations have done. because your land is built on the blood, sweat, and tears of the African. That is not under dispute. No one disputes that. You understand? And
No,
so a full...
Is sorry good enough? Is sorry acceptable? I mean, we've heard arguments. History cannot be erased, nor can it be changed. We've heard apologies. We've heard an apology most recently from King Charles, but is saying sorry good enough? What else is necessary? What else is necessary for reparations? How does this work?
No. Sorry is not good enough. You have to personalize it, Keaton. And this is why groups other than the African groups have trouble reconciling with what the African is demanding. You have trouble reconciling it because it's difficult for you to put yourself in the shoes of the African. That's not a difficulty for me. I see myself in those Africans that was on the bottom of those ships, Keaton, packed like sardines, on the bottom of ships that was meant to hold 80 people, that they now pack 200 people on. And in order to get them on, they have to pack them like sardines. You know what sardines look like in a can? That's what we look like on the bottom of those ships. I see myself in those people. You understand? It may be difficult for you to do, and no one is asking you to do so. But it's not difficult for me to do. I feel it, and I see it. You understand? So that's the direction that we're coming. This is what I mean by that shark bite. Because that has not been healed. Every African really feel that. Some don't know that they feel it. And those that don't know that they feel it, let a white man walk up to them and call them a nigger, and they will feel it immediately. Right? Those Africans that are saying, well, I was never a slave and everything is fine with me today. I have a good education and so forth and so forth and so forth. Let a white man walk up to them and call them a nigger. Huh? And see what inside of them rises up immediately. Oprah Winfrey had that experience. When she went to, I believe, Zane or one of the jewelry stores, and she saw, well, she had already previewed a gift that she wanted to buy for Tina Turner for her birthday. And she saw it in the window. And she went, and the store was not yet closed. They had 10 minutes of closing time. But they closed the door because they were about to get into their Christmas celebration or something of that sort. And Oprah Winfrey went there and said, look, let me in. I know what I want. Here's my black card. Let me just buy and go. And the woman looked at her and said, I know who you are, but you're not coming in. And Oprah Winfrey, without thinking, said immediately, if I was Celine Dion, you would let me in. She felt the impact of racism immediately, down to her cells, because it's in every African on this planet has that in their cellular memory, right? Some are over-educated to the point where they think it's not there, but trust me, it is there. That shark bite has not healed. And reparative justice is what is going to be a great remedy towards healing that shark bite, right? Let us admit now in that full formal apology, not just I'm sorry, but let's stand before the court and the court will say, all right, look, give you a moment to allocute here. Why did you shoot this woman's son? You understand? I don't just want to hear, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I did it. The judge will want you to now repeat what you did. What are you sorry for? You must acknowledge what you are sorry for. It's not enough for me to break into your home, right, and assault your family, and then just turn around and say to you, I'm sorry. What am I sorry for? You would want me to articulate that. I did this thing. It was a wrong thing I did. I apologize for that. So a full formal apology is not, I'm sorry, Keita. I'm sorry is not a full formal. People say I'm sorry every day of their life, and they go back and do the very same thing they did. You understand? I'm sorry is a word that could fly out of everyone's mouth, right? But a full formal apology, have you now taken responsibility for what you did? This will now correct history, because the history books will now have to be corrected. No longer can you sanitize what you did and say, okay, it was just for economic purposes. We just wanted to build our empire. And these people in Africa seemed like they were the strongest people. We kind of surveyed them, and they could stay all day in the sun and and all of these things. And we just wanted to build our empire. Well, if that's what you wanted to do and you built your empire, why did you have to put the African through the kind of torture and pain that you did? Huh?
Well, Mr. Piggott, the unfortunate thing is that at this point on the program, we have run out of time. We've gone a bit over time. However, that being said, I'm glad that you've laid a platform for a conversation that I hope that we can continue tomorrow. So I hope that tomorrow morning there's time, and I'm preempting it one time, where we've laid a platform for the ethical and empirical arguments for reparations. And then we can get into that discussion further tomorrow in respect to exactly what is necessary, how would a formal apology now correct history. So, Mr. Piggott, I'm going to thank you for your time this morning and say I look forward to part 2. Once you are doing this.
Right. And Keaton, what I would encourage you to do, right? There is a gentleman that is well studied on this subject. He lectures on it. This is what he does. He lectures on it, right? I would have a conversation with you on it. But I would recommend a gentleman by the name of Dr. David Mohammed, right? He's a force to be reckoned with.
Yes.
And if you have this gentleman on your program, because this is a subject that he lectures on regularly, his talking points will be such that he will be able to guide that talk about. If you engage me in a conversation, Kitan, you're going to get a lot of passion before you get down to some facts and some empirical, data and all of those things. You're going to get my passion. You're going to feel my
I will tell you, Mr. Piggott, that sometimes that passion is necessary.
It is.
I understand what you're saying, and I very much appreciate where you're coming from. But we will certainly work on that. But I believe that everyone has a voice, everyone has an opinion. You are very much passionate about this topic, and I think it is very much necessary to have a better understanding. So yes, we certainly will try to get Dr. Mohammed on the program, and you, of course, you have.
And I will have no problem coming back tomorrow, Keaton, and continue that. One of the things I'd like to share with your audience before we go is that there's a group of European families now called the heirs of slavery, right? These are people who have just woke up and realized that all the riches they have came from the blood, sweat, and tears of the African. And they have formed themselves into a group called the heirs of slavery. And they are championing reparative justice for the African. These are a group of white people that are wealthy. Their families, they don't have just money. They have generational wealth. And they have just discovered that generational wealth came from the backs and the blood and the sweat and the tears of the African. And their conscience now will not allow them to just simply sit by and spend that money on vacationing and things of that nature. They now want to give back. And they're encouraging other European families. They're encouraging the government of Europe, the churches that were involved in the enslavement of the African, such as the Church of England and the Anglican Church and so forth. And I mentioned to you how the Pope itself back in 1452 was very central and responsible for genesing this so-called slave trade, the Catholic Church, very culpable. So these are the things that we must keep in mind. And the conversation you had with Ms. Wadada talking about the naming of streets and so on and so forth, there's a reason why when the British got here to Tobago in particular, that what is now called Fort King George was once called Fort Castries. That was the history. So why didn't they say, well, that's history, let's leave history the way it is? No, they got rid of that. They got rid of many names that the French had and renamed it in their name, their brand, to say this is ours. And now what we're saying is we must rename this place to say this is ours. No longer the British, no longer Spain, no longer France. This is Trinidad and Tobago. And I could end there, Keaton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pigger. We are very much over time. Thank you very much for joining us on the program this morning. And we look forward to you to come. Thank you.
I'll see you in the morning. Thank you, Keaton.
Bye-bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much to Mr. Pigger. So I preempted a conversation that you can look forward to tomorrow morning on AM Prime. And the reason being is because there is so much to share with you that conversation is necessary. So Mr. Pigger did recommend also Dr. David Mohammed to join us on the program, and we certainly will do our best to get him on AM Prime. But as I mentioned, everyone has a voice, everyone has an opinion, and we very much champion that, and we champion discussions on WESN. So we thank you for joining us on the program, and we also thank you very much for sharing all your opinions and thoughts with us. Ladies and gentlemen, as we end, thank you very much. And it's a intriguing question. What does your name mean? What does your name mean? Do you know what your name means? I was put on this morning. I was asked that question, and I have been told by a few people actually who are familiar with me. My name is Poet, and a quick search online, I have very many names, very many meanings to my name. So in Hindi, Keaton means home or golden. It means invitation, signal, abode. In Sanskrit, it means stability, security, and a sense of belonging. So what does your name mean? You know, what does Ryan Gomez Burke mean? What does Malwood mean? To my colleagues in WSN in the studio this morning watching, I guess that's something that you can do later on, do some research when you get some time throughout the course of the day. But that's it, ladies and gentlemen. To my guests, thank you very much for joining me this morning, and of course to my team at WSN for their hard work. I'm Keaton Shaw, reminding you today is a good day to have a good day. We'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Perfection doesn't happen by chance. Like an artist, the cook selects the main ingredient, one that is worthy of a proud cultural tradition. Trusted to enhance your creations with its richness and versatility. To create a cooking masterpiece, the secret is simple. The brand we know, the brand we trust.